everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second part of our webinar series, What's Working? Make Your Data Work for You. To start, I'd like to introduce myself and our presenters for today. I'm Kara Murphy, the Marketing Manager at Agile, and will be your moderator. And I'm joined by Agile's Managing Partner and CIO, Verlan Stephens, and we also have Liz Acton-Trimoloff on the line as well, who is the Director of Marketing from Agile. Before we get started, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. To submit your questions, please use the question box in the control center, and I'll be keeping track of those as they come in. They will be answered at the end, so don't worry, we will get to your questions. If you have any audio or visual issues, use the same control center and send in your issue, and I will do my best to assist you. And as always, you will receive a recorded version of the webinar in the next few days. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a short 3-question survey, and if you have a few minutes at the end of this, please let us know how we did, as your feedback is extremely valuable and will help us to develop more webinars catered to you. Now, let's get ready to talk data. But before I hand it over to Verlan, we'd like to do a quick poll to understand how you work with your data. I'm going to put that up on the screen. And if you're not on there right now, that's completely fine. Awesome, thank you guys. Okay, some are still coming in, so I'll give it a few more seconds. Perfect, so I'm going to close it out. It looks like based on the most popular thing, and this is very awesome to hear as we are talking about data, we have 50% of you saying that you update your data weekly. So that is awesome. Good job, you guys. Okay, now that that is done and we have Verlan on the line, I'm going to hand it over to Verlan.
Thanks, Kara. Appreciate it. Special thanks to Kara and to Liz both for all the work they do in putting on our webinars. We really appreciate that, and it gives us a great opportunity to showcase some of the staff here within Agile and be able to share information in our own areas of expertise with the rest of our community. So thank you very much, and glad to be here today. So today we're going to talk about data. As the CIO, that's kind of where I live and where I spend all of my energy at. And so we're going to talk about some best practices and things around that. So on the data side, we're going to talk a bit about cleaning up your existing data records. We're going to talk about how to access additional prospects and add prospecting data, and then also to complete the information that's already in your CRM and fill that out with additional data. So first, let's talk a little bit about, what's the cost of dirty data? It's really quite large to an organization. When you look at it, it's the #1 reason for CRM failure. I generally call a CRM as a dumping ground. Everything comes in, but nothing goes out. There isn't generally, in many cases, a mechanism for how do you prune out, bad information. We were recently doing a match project with some client data, and when we do our matches, we do both active school buildings as well as historical. Our historical data goes back 10 years, and we review the non-matches. We had some non-matches in this one, and there was a school in there that had closed 19 years ago. And so, you end up with this data that got inserted into the CRM at some point, but never ever got extracted out, even though that school closed nearly 20 years ago. That data then rolls up when somebody's doing a sales forecast or when a sales rep is looking at their territory, it comes up. So there's a real direct impact on an organization when you have this bad data. According to Experian, inaccurate data has a direct impact on 88% of companies. So the vast majority of companies have a direct impact. And the average revenue loss is 12%. It's a stunning number. I was thinking about that as a business owner. If I could gain 12% additional revenue, that would be a big deal. For us, 12% lost revenue, it's nearly twice what we spent on our marketing budget. So everything we spend on marketing doesn't overcome the bad data aspect. So it's an interesting thing to kind of think about that total cost and understand what the cost of the organization is. It's actually quite large. What are the benefits of having quality data? So number one is increased efficiency. So 62% of the company said, having good data gives them increased efficiency. Having sales reps make calls into numbers that are not connected, trying to reach people that are no longer there, you can understand very quickly how that inefficiency builds up and what the direct impact is, particularly in your sales and marketing efforts. The second part is increased customer satisfaction, being able to have accurate and complete data about a customer. We see quite often problems with duplicates, and so you have customer information spread out across 2, 3, 4, 5 different accounts, and it gets really hard to kind of consolidate and understand what's the entire picture going on with this customer, or maybe the record you're on doesn't even have the latest information, so you're unaware of what kind of issues a customer might be having. Cost savings, we just talked about the cost of that. The other is customer profiling, and even beyond customer profiling, one of the things we find is quite often customers come to us when they're struggling to produce management reporting. I was just on the phone with a client this last week, and he said, boy, that project when we first met, and this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, that was such a nightmare of a project, and it was because the company he worked for at the time, they were trying to do management reporting and trying to figure out what market sizing was and do sales projections, and the data they had in their CRM was not accurate enough to do that. And so the sales ops team was under a lot of pressure to get the data cleaned, get it corrected, make sure the numbers were good so that they could do sales planning and management reporting. Try not to find yourself in the same situation there. That's a challenging place to be. So data in the CRM really comes from 3 different places. First is your customer file. So typically, you know a lot of information about those people. They're your current customers. You know who the key contacts are. That data has tremendous value, and most customers keep that information pretty clean. The second is a house list. So leads that you get from sales and marketing efforts that come through the website, that come through trade shows, other things. The last one is really third-party data, where you're loading in prospect information and that information that you get from outside sources. It's important to assess each of the sources, where that data is coming from, and what the need for accuracy is. When we start to talk about sales and marketing efforts, we're really seeing a period now where there's real impacts of having bad data in your CRM file. Marketing automation companies are more and more focused on the quality of data that you're sending. Your email bounce rates are very important. They not only help determine whether that marketing automation vendor is going to continue to let you send, but it's also used as part of the information that companies like Google or Microsoft use in terms of inbox placement. The other piece is really engagement. Google is now really focused on engagement. So as a campaign is going out, they're looking at your engagement rates, and based on early engagement rates, they decide where they're going to place that. And if you have low engagement rates, it goes into the spam folder and in most cases never to be seen again. So there's a real penalty now to having bad data in your CRM and marketing automation systems that really didn't exist probably 4 or 5 years ago. We just didn't see that kind of, intense scrutiny and ramifications to it. If you had a 12, 15% bounce rate, oh well, yeah, we'll scrub those off, but it didn't impact fundamentally the business. Today, if you get cut off by your marketing automation vendor or your placement gets poor, you really have a hard time recovering from that. Thanks, Kara.
Thank you. And right now, before we go to the next slide, I am actually going to put up another poll, and this is about what you guys feel the percentage of change is within a file, within a school, on a year-over-year basis. So if you're not on the screen, that's totally fine. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like we're evening out. And it looks like, Verlan, we have about 64% of people saying 19% and 17% for 5% and 30%. So I think this fits in perfectly with our next slide.
That it does. Thanks, Kara. So, you know, on the K-12 side, these numbers come out of our K-12 data. So every year we see a turnover. Last year in particular, 19.1% of educators left the district or teaching altogether. That's a very consistent number year over year. We see anywhere from about 17 to 22, 19 lands right in there, and that's what we see. If we start to add in the changes with job roles and things, it's well over a 30% change every year. So we see dramatic amount of change in this file, you know, every year when we're seeing that many educators coming and going. We also, during this fall rostering period where we're capturing all this data and we're contacting schools, we'll update the information for 400,000 educators in a given week. And so the amount of data flow is quite large in this period. And so it's important that you have a mechanism for being able to get that information onto your file relatively quickly. Agile updates and republishes our data set weekly. So all of the changes we get during the week get published on the weekend and get available for our clients on a weekly basis. It's important to consume that information relatively quickly. When we talked about the impacts of having bad emails and things on the file, you know, getting that information flowing in a timely manner is critical. I'm asked often from clients, you know, what do you consider best practice in terms of updating data? In the CRM, my best practice is at least on a monthly basis that information ought to be updated. Super excited that we saw a large number of people that were updating as frequently as a weekly basis, because that's information stales so quickly that if you don't have that mechanism to get that new information in there, you're sorely going to be behind based on what changes are actually being applied to the file. When we look at just the raw numbers, so that 19% of the K-12 file means we have over 800,000 new educators coming on every particularly fall typically. So there's a lot of update, a lot of new people coming on. The number here on the email surprised even me when I pulled it preparing for this webinar. That we bounced off of our file almost 600,000 emails last year. So we deploy millions of emails every month. Based on those, we're removing hard bounces from our file. We typically remove in a given week 12, 15,000 emails every week come off of our file as being no longer deliverable. So in total last year, almost 600,000 emails. The one thing that's fairly unique to education is with the impact of Google and their free email services to the districts. More and more districts have gone through domain changes as they move on to Google. Last time I pulled the number, we were over 55% of districts were now Google-based. And to facilitate that, they go through domain change. So we went back, looked, we had over 5,000 districts and private schools change their email domains last year. This represented hundreds and hundreds of thousands of emails. So, you know, that level of change is coming through not only what we see with the educator changes, but also other changes like the domain changes that come through. So dramatic amount of change happens on this file every single week. This is a screenshot out of our Connect Link demo account. and basically shows the turnover within a district. If the second column over there is whether that person is active or inactive in the district. And you can scan down there and see the attrition and see that those people are no longer active. We've had this demo running with live data for about 4 years now. 41% of the district personnel have turned over in this district. So, that's the kind of change that you see, and having a mechanism where you're able to remove those records or at a minimum have an active, inactive flag. So your team knows what's active, they know who is inactive, and you're not trying to send to inactive people. It's really important because over time, it's easy to get to where your data is only 50, 60% accurate. And, this is just a good example of that. The other thing that we really recommend is that people implement a real data quality data quality program, where you go through and you identify what are the sources of our information first, and then where does bad information creep in? Is it that we don't have a mechanism for pulling things out, or is it that we don't have a good mechanism on the front end when we capture? We see it all the time in clients' information where they'll have a school spelled 5 or 6 different ways. GW High School, George Washington High School, Washington High School, Washington High, that type of thing where the free-form entry was allowed, and so you end up with just this kind of hodgepodge of data that's hard to roll up, it's hard to synchronize, it's hard to work with. But go through, identify both where the good data is coming from, where the bad data is coming from, and start to put controls in place. The next is really to identify who has responsibility for these data elements. So what roles and programs are needed to clean up the information you have and keep it clean? Being able to go through and say, new institutions or new schools are always created by this team. And it will always have this information. It has to have a street address, it has to have a phone number, whatever that is the kind of minimum requirements, and that there's real kind of enforcement of that so that you know that when a school shows up, somebody's checked it for a duplicate, you're not creating a dupe, and then it has the minimum necessary viable information to make that useful. The more advanced members of our clients really have established data governance teams where it's not only do they go through and identify those roles one time, but they actually have a team that oversees and continues to monitor changes to the business, what additional data needs to be added, what are going to be the sources, and how that can best be controlled. Once clients establish a data governance team, we tend to see real improvements in the overall quality of their information and their ability to maintain that quality over time. Updating customer-facing forms. So much of the bad data comes in from incomplete information coming in from form fill-in. And there are a couple of things there. One is just kind of sloppiness on the front end of not being able to control things like school names, validate emails as they come in, that it's a valid domain for that district and things like that. The other is, and we even see this on some of our own websites, where anytime you've got an outward-facing form, you've got essentially some level of hacker. You've got all these Chinese email addresses and things coming in, and being able to screen that information at the beginning so that you don't have 50 or 100 Chinese emails on your CRM file. It's important. It's important to catch that on that front end and keep it out. That way you're not having to spend time later on trying to clean up that information after the fact. The manners in keeping it clean, one of the things we've offered for a long time is an API that allows access from any website to be able to pull data from Agile and be able to validate information. Our master data set has 350,000 institutions, 6.2 million people. There's a lot of information there, and quite often, given just an email address, we can complete the rest of the information. We can tell you exactly what school they're at, what their role is, what their email address is, potentially what their phone number is. And so there's a lot of information that can be gathered and validated right there. Even if you back up a level, being able to validate things that that email domain matches that district or matches that school, that's an important way to clean up and validate that information right at the point of capture. Too often, we don't see as many of the clients using those API resources as I think would help with their overall data quality issues and being able to have better quality from the get-go. And really the whole design of landing pages and form capture, so much of the incoming prospects these days all come in on mobile devices, and having an ability to have very little data input from the user and yet complete a very complete record and picture of that person is really important. The second is around prospects and nurturing marketing automation integrations. Agile now offers quite a number of marketing automation integrations, from Marketo to HubSpot to Eloqua, and really that allows for good data at that initial prospecting level. So we either can enhance data that you've pulled in and be able to fill out records and update that information and standardize it. But we also then, if you're pulling prospect data, it's pulled in a very complete manner and is a very, very effective way. We rematch that data nightly, and so there's an ability to really keep that information clean so that your marketing automation efforts are as good as possible, and really gives you the ability to target your marketing automation streams and things much better. The last is really on the CRM integration side. So Agile is certainly the leader in terms of CRM integration. We've offered Salesforce integration now for over 5 years. And having that ability to synchronize and keep your data up to date in your CRM so that your sales team deals with quality information on an ongoing basis, just a critical component of this keep it clean strategy. But once you've gone through the effort to keep good data in your CRM, having ability to maintain that is critical going forward. Accessing prospects, more and more of our customers are using sophisticated marketing automation where they can target specific demographics, they can push messages, they can define flows where a particular prospect experience goes through an information flow where they're fed additional information, and with scoring and things. It's really critical to have good information to help drive your marketing automation efforts, where you really know, oh, these people don't understand what our product is. Based on the intelligence that we have, we need to start them at a very educational level. Maybe you've got a group that are sophisticated and they really understand what's going on, and so you can build upon that. So having access to specific demographics, geography information, additional data points really allows you to have a much more targeted capability to go out and market to prospects. Whether you're running to customers or to non-customer lists, that way you really have the information to be effective marketers. Next slide, Kara. So making it meaningful, understanding more and more about the recipients and what their roles are. So often it's really interesting when we look at schools and what a collaborative environment it is. And one of my favorite examples of this, we were doing some research a couple of years ago on social media, and one of the big social media influencers in leadership training was a lady out of Texas, and her role in our database was as a vice principal. She's a vice principal at an elementary school. Doesn't really stand out as being anything from a leadership training perspective. But when we dug deeper, we could see, oh, she's the chair of the leadership training committee in that school district. And as such, she also had not only a lot of people within that district that she was influencing, but she had a reputation in surrounding districts as kind of the go-to person when you're talking about educational leadership. And so it was interesting to see, how influential that person is and what they're, even despite they're different than what their role is on a school basis. Being able to find similar people, this whole idea of lookalikes and things, we do a lot of profiling work and try and understand where new opportunities can exist, where the best markets for a particular product are, and really working with our clients to, be able to find those additional people or help refine their strategy to, you've done great in small rural schools, how can you expand and move up that chain and identify new potential markets. Diving into rich data, at a school district level, we carry over 600 different demographics on school districts. Just a massive amount of information about what kind of programs they have and what kind of hardware they have and what kind of software products they have and assessment tools. We really have a massive amount of information now that we've gathered around school districts that really allows for very targeted, very meaningful messaging when you're reaching out. You understand what the environment looks like in that particular district from all that information that we've gathered. Taking advantage of this market intelligence and district listing tools in our EdIntel product really allow for very insightful marketing automation. A couple of things we're going to look at here is on the engagement side, lesser used titles. We look a lot at what the outreach looks like to various titles and things, and we'll see that in a minute. The other thing we talked about a minute ago, one title, many roles. Our case example of the assistant principal in Texas. She's the assistant principal by title. Her role of, education leadership training is a very different, it's part of the roles that she takes on. We see in many districts where, teachers have a role in selecting technology. We see where, maybe a principal is filling in and helping with elementary curriculum. And so quite often, it's hard to identify, what people are, their actual roles are versus what their title is in a particular district. Quite often people are filling multiple roles. We also look at engagement and what people we get to engage through different channels. Who engages through email, who engages through social, and so that we have that ability to help direct your marketing efforts into the most appropriate channel. From an analysis side, we have an e-profile tool where we can profile market penetration and be able to profile against many of our data variables, so we can say, what is the common characteristics of where there's sales or where there's not sales, and be able to identify and help suggest potential changes to that. Being able to do market sizing. There's a lot of times where people are just trying to identify that, they're maybe they're higher ed and moving down into high schools, and so they want to understand, what does that market look like? How many AP students are there, or something that would help them identify what that market size looks like, and how to prioritize. Based on your current sales, where do you prioritize strategically? Where's your next opportunity going to land? In-depth reporting, we look at performance, segment detail, testing and experimentation. So we do a lot of work with our clients around, testing of A/B on emails, and looking at same thing on the social side. Do we see better performance of one ad versus another ad, and helping, make sure that we've got good refined messages to the right audience. As we start to roll down through a number of our data elements, we talked a little bit about email and social engagement and being able to identify audiences based on where they're going to most likely respond. That way your marketing efforts are focused on the people and the channel that they're most likely to respond to. Low message density. We look at the difference, and we'll see here in an upcoming slide of, how many emails a superintendent or a principal gets versus some of the other teaching staff. And you've got to realize when you're going after some of these titles that have a lot of high message density, It's hard to get through it. It's hard to get through the clutter. And so being able to identify other influencers and things might be a great way to get your message out there. Agile builds a proprietary education climate index where we look at educational attainment in the area and wealth in the area and other things, parent involvement, that helps drive that this is a particular district or school with a high education index. They're likely to be supportive of education, and so that way you can find those pockets of opportunity mixed in with the rest of it. You can also look at things like growing districts or shrinking districts, being able to identify, where your product is most likely to be desired and wanted. We can also look at, things like new teachers, messages that go out to them. For us, I talk to a lot of people about new superintendents. Quite often we see that the change in a superintendent is a significant change in that district. And so it's an opportunity, if they're an existing client, to make sure that you make contact and that you're solid with the new team. And if you're not, it's an opportunity that quite often we see significant changes after a new super comes in. We had a district here in Colorado a few years ago that within a year of bringing on a new superintendent, they had turned over 75% of their district staff. Clearly, there was a very large change in philosophy there, and they cleaned house and came in with a whole new team. It's a great opportunity for you to identify those and make sure you're on the right side of that change. The district listening or our Ed Intel programs then help also focus your efforts on the districts that are most likely to need your resources. Finding the right contact. I mentioned a second ago that we see teachers that are influencers in a lot of different decisions, and this was choosing tech for their classroom. So over 50% of urban teachers have a role in participation in that. Many teachers offer input to a tech leader. Some have no role, but it really being able to look at extracted information and say, where are we going to be able to find these influencers? Who are these key influencers? Cluttered inboxes. So, when we look at in our area, we call them the turns. How many times does a particular title turn? So a superintendent or a principal, how many times we sell that title? And it's directly related to then how many emails those people receive. So when we look at our own, that in a given point in time, if a director of instruction curriculum or principal or superintendent, they all turn about the same rate, receive 10 emails. The literacy coach, the guidance counselor, the tech coordinator, English language arts teacher receive 1. So, if you can identify those influencers, see who's opening your messages and responding in some way, that really gets you on the track to how do I break through the clutter of that inbox. Part of it is by looking for other influencers that might be able to really bring that value and get you in the door. Most often, those high-level titles, the principal doesn't initiate a sale. They respond to requests from somebody else. Same thing with the superintendent. They're not out there researching what's the next curriculum tool or assessment tool that we ought to be using. They're taking input from their team. So, having a presence at that level is important. They're going to have to sign. They want to know who you are. But finding who are those people that are likely to be initiating and influencing that purchase is really critical to your efforts. One of the things we look a lot at, particularly on our social media side, is our lookalike targeting and being able to identify other people that we can reach out to that look like the group we're having success with. And with the large amount of data we have, we can really get in and find additional audiences that really look like the ones that have performed well. And so being able to do that kind of lookalike targeting is really key to, you've had successful marketing campaigns. Now, how do you build on it? And this is a great way to build upon that and add additional prospects into your marketing automation streams. We've talked about a lot of these, kind of on the deep data side, the school climate. We've hit a number of those. We're adding some additional things. We've added a lot recently kind of around the makerspace area, that this project-based learning and makerspaces, there's a lot of activity in that, and so we've added additional information there. We have a lot around instructional methodologies. Does this school use blended learning? Do they use flipped learning? And so being able to understand what instructional methodologies and how your product maps into that or doesn't. And so that way you get to assess, is this school or is this district a good prospect for us based on what they're already adopting or what they're discussing adopting. What interactive technologies do they have? Are they a Promethean district? Are they a smart district? What kind of tools do they have? What kind of assessment tools are they using? What kind of technology platforms? School performance. So often the message, and we do a whole webinar around school performance and talk about, the difference in the needs of a principal at a high-performing school in terms of parent management is very different from a low-performing school where they're very focused on how do they bring up test scores of students that are struggling, how they improve their reading skills. So understanding the detailed characteristics of those schools and what tools they're likely to need and where their leadership team is focused in terms of challenges. It's really important when you're reaching out to have that level of knowledge. We also have a very robust data set around E-rate, so knowing what kind of tools and things are available, what kind of bandwidth is going into individual schools or districts. We've now got a lot of information around that. Just was reading this last week, I think it was San Antonio, has a $9 million project upgrading infrastructure that was all E-rate funded. So there's certainly a lot of money going in there, and it's really brought up overall the technical sophistication and bandwidth capabilities of the schools and districts. But having access to this allows you to enhance your house lists. Back for just a second, Kara. Work with your prospects better and really identify those opportunities. So having that deep information really allows for you as marketers or sales teams to do better jobs of identifying exactly who to go after and exactly what the message ought to be. It's not just about having a list of emails. School climate, we've added information recently around really what does that whole school climate look like? How many suspensions does this school have? What kind of challenges they're dealing with. You couple that with what their test scores are, and you really start to get a very complete picture about what the challenges are. We see a lot of interest in SEL, PBIS, and really being able to address school climate type issues. So we've added a tremendous amount of data around that. Super excited about doing what we can to help promote positive change in terms of school climate. Wow, that was quick. Questions?
Yes, we did have some come through, so I'm going to go through those. If you have questions that you've been sitting on, feel free to send them in now as we go over them. The first one, so if someone doesn't license Agile data, which I am sure there are people on the line that don't, how could they get their data updated? What ways can we help them update their files, even if they don't use the Agile data?
We work with people that way all the time. We have certainly a number of clients that don't necessarily license large swaths of data, but they have a database they're trying to clean up. So we have a very efficient mechanism for being able, and an effective mechanism for being able to match somebody's information and help identify duplicates, help identify closed schools, help identify role changes, help identify people that are no longer active. So from a data cleansing standpoint, we can certainly help with clients, even if they're not licensing the Agile data set, in helping them progress towards, getting a clean starting point and then hopefully grow to, actually becoming a licensed client.
Okay, great. And this one's interesting, and I think this could be for you, Verlan, and Liz. A lot of times organizations, they have different systems for different groups. So there's something for sales and there's something for marketing. Usually it's a CRM for sales, marketing automation for marketing. What would a solution be if you just wanted something for a sales team to be able to have their territory, plan it, be able to build out their list, download it, so that way when they're on the road, they can pull something up and make sure that they're contacting the correct person?
So, Agile has a number of tools for directly interfacing with many of the leading CRM systems, and we're continuing to build out that list. So, we certainly have had for a long time a focus on making sure that CRM data, beyond that, we offer some of our own direct tools. Our Data Explorer tool, has the ability to operate in both a desktop and mobile environment where you can pull up information and find schools within a particular area, or find this detailed information we've been talking about. So that when you go in the door at a particular place, you know what more about their climate and what they're dealing with. And so you can start from a point of knowledge, and so having that information. Liz, do you have things to add on that?
Yeah, so Data Explorer was the first thing that came to my mind. Thank you, Verlan, for covering this. And I think that one of the things that we do here at Agile really well is we have a variety of solutions. So if you're a smaller company, you might not have a ton of records, and that's really different from a larger organization that has millions of records with millions of activities going on, and engagement activities from your sales team, email campaigns being deployed, and your data just grows and grows and grows. And if you're smaller, or if you're more enterprise, you might just have a lower volume of transactions. And I think Data Explorer is a great tool to use on either of those sides, because you just don't have the volume that would make it make sense to do an ongoing integration and data lease. And it's a scale thing. Are you small? Are you big? And it really is just in terms of data. It's almost a separate conversation from how big your company is. But a lot of times, if you're starting out, or if you're a large organization and you might be looking at a new territory, a new market, going in slowly, it can help you sort of figure out what works. And then from there, this Data Explorer interface and product can help you experiment, very cost effective. And then from there, you can build out, what do I need ongoing? What do I need to be integrated, so that, the whole sales team can take advantage of what we've learned, from trials, tests, and what we know about this market and how we want to move forward. So I think that we have it, but also depending on what your needs are, we have a lot of different solutions. And I think one of the things too is, even with that sort of experimenting, we do have the engagement side where we can go out and deploy into a new segment or a new market or a new geography, and you can get a feel for what it is, and we can certainly support those efforts without you having to make a big commitment, ahead of any knowledge about it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that prompted anything on Verlan's end. Yeah, thank you, Kara.
This one is interesting because, Verlan, you talked about it at the beginning, we did the client match and they had a school that was, I think you said 19 years old still on the file, which, I mean, clearly to anyone that would show as old data and you haven't updated it. What is another experience with someone that we saw how it actually impacted their organization?
You know, the place we see so much of the impact is being able to have accurate management reporting. So being able to roll up the schools in a particular region or a particular territory and have accurate information so that you can set sales quotas, so that you can establish plans, you can determine market sizing and opportunities. That's really critical information for the management of any education company. And so, you know, I think that's where so often the ones that I'm working with, that's where I see the biggest impact. I think on the other side is really working with the other end of it, where you're a salesperson trying to get a certain number of calls or a certain number of appointments set up, and having access to good, accurate information on a day-to-day basis to where you feel like when I pick up the phone, I'm going to get hold of somebody. I'm going to get hold of the right person that I'm trying to reach, and I'm not going to end up spending a bunch of my time going around trying to find, oh, that person left 3 years ago, and now I'm trying to figure out who the new person is, and some websites have information and some don't, and you know, you want that sales team to be effective. You want them to be selling. You don't want them to be data researchers. That's not what their role is, and you want them to be productive. So we really see big gains in both of those areas in terms of management reporting and being able to understand market sizes, as well as just day-to-day operations in terms of being able to set up appointments and make calls.
Yes, and I think exactly what you just said goes to the name of the webinar. If you have the data, you're able to call and have it work for you to make sure that you're getting the correct person and not having to waste that time. Okay, so this is our last question, and this is interesting. So yes, today was about data, but it impacts the sales, it impacts marketing, and essentially every part of the business. With personalization being such a key factor, if someone doesn't have all of the key data points or even more than a first name and email, how does that impact how they're able to connect with that person and be able to sell a better relationship and their product into a school or a teacher?
You know, I think first off is we see a dramatic difference in terms of campaigns that are very general going out to a large audience versus those that are very specific. So if you have a different message that goes out to a teacher versus an administrator versus a district administrator, we see 2, 3, 4, 5 times difference in response rates with smaller target audiences with a message that's appropriate for that person. And so, you know, having just a bunch of emails really lessens your ability. You know, if you're talking about 4 or 5 times better open rate, that's a big difference. And having that additional information and really being able to understand who are we talking to and what's the message that's appropriate for that person is absolutely key. And we see that in terms of the numbers all the time. Liz, other input on that one?
Yeah, so I think one of the things too is thinking about personalization beyond just making sure that people know what you know about them. So it's not just putting their name or calling out the name of their school or district. It can be things like if you've run an e-profile for your different, you know, if you have 5 products and you've run a profile for those 5 products, you know that the key attributes of the different schools and districts and potentially the people who are tend to be the users of those products. And so you can personalize based on a good product fit. And so you are serving up out of your 5 products, here's the one that's right for you. Or, you know, also you can make the value proposition specific to that particular individual and their role and how your product meets their needs. And so I think that that's one of the things as we get in, you know, as we talk more and more about, you know, personalization, segmentation, really tailoring your message, I think the next step is for all of us to really consider what that means. And that's where all of the data that we, our clients have access to can really help to inform that. Are you a high Title I school? Are you not? What does that mean if you're a guidance counselor versus, curriculum director versus a principal? How does your product help to solve for their needs? And in turn, a principal is responsible for all the students, whereas a curriculum director is responsible for the teacher's ability to teach, and a guidance counselor is working, potentially with anti-bullying and SEL. And so how does your product ensure that kids feel good, for example, about the work that they're doing? And so I think that those are a lot of the things that can start to come to life and really help your intended audience see you as a valuable partner beyond just trying to sell them something. And that's where I like personalization from the more holistic sense of just you're really trying to make it super simple for someone to say, wow, this can help me achieve my goals. So that's, yeah. And I don't know if you want to go into a little bit more. You Verlan, that all the different data points, how many and the types, we've got funding. I mean, so many different things, and the indices. And I don't know if maybe we want to close, if you want to talk a little bit about the education climate index and some of the proprietary ones that you've put together just to help clients better segment and understand what's going on at the school level. Those are ones that I love to talk to people about.
No, I think that there's a lot of different things, and it's important to understand, kind of what the characteristics of your clients are and what group that it really resonates with, and who are you really trying to reach out to. So all of that information plays into that, whether it's education climate or a tech index, or understanding, you've got a video product, and does this district have the bandwidth to support our video conferencing product or our video delivery? And so all of that information is really important in helping you weed out, and identify, here are the great prospects and here are the ones that aren't. There's no reason, if you have high bandwidth video, that you should be out marketing to a district that can't support it. You're just wasting their time and you're wasting your time. So, use that information to make your sales and prospecting efforts stronger and more relevant to the people you're trying to reach.
Thank you. That was a great question.
Okay, so we're closing up on time, and that was our last question. Verlan or Liz, do you have anything else to say?
No, it was great to be able to share this information. And we look forward to, Agile is a resource to our clients. And so make sure, if you have additional questions, you reach out to the team here, and we're more than happy to, discuss more about your individual needs, or what we can do to help you be more effective as a sales and marketing organization.
Yes, I agree with what Verlan says, and the email is on the screen. So if you have any more questions, feel free to email us at info@agile-ed.com, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Otherwise, we hope you enjoyed today's webinar and you join us for the next one, and we have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.